You wake up. It is a Tuesday in January. Your alarm is going off, and the room is just a fraction of a degree colder than you would like it to be. You pull the blanket up to your chin. You think about the commute. You think about how nice it would be to just stay right here, in this cocoon of warmth, and never step foot on the cold bathroom tiles. We all know this feeling, the absolute visceral rejection of the cold. But picture this, you wake up, there is no snooze button, no mortgage, and no guilt over unread emails. But there is also no blanket, there is no thermostat, there is no house. You open your eyes and you are looking at a sky the color of crushed iron. The wind hitting your face is so sharp, it feels like physical teeth biting into your skin. You are standing on a vast, treeless plain of dry grass and dust. It is 20,000 years before now. Welcome to the Last Glacial Maximum, the deepest, darkest, most brutal stretch of the Ice Age. And you are, biologically speaking, a tropical ape. Think about that for a second. We did not evolve for this. Underneath whatever you are wearing right now, your body is a machine built for the blazing heat of the African savanna. We lost our thick body hair millions of years ago so we could sweat and run down antelopes in the blistering sun. We have long, lanky limbs meant to radiate heat away from our cores. We are, by every metric of biology and physics, completely and utterly unqualified to be standing in a frozen wasteland where the temperature routinely drops to -40 degrees Celsius. And yet, we did. Or rather, our ancestors did. They didn't just accidentally stumble into the snow and die, they stayed. They looked at a world covered in ice sheets 2 miles thick, a world where the sheer glare of the ice could blind you, and they figured out how to live there. But here is a question nobody actually asks, mostly because we've all been brainwashed by cute animated movies with talking mammoths. How did they actually do it? Not as in, oh, they wore skins and lived in caves. Obviously they wore skins. But how did they not just freeze solid in their sleep? How do you survive an apocalyptic winter that lasts for thousands of years using nothing but rocks, sticks, and whatever you can catch? What if we're wrong, and it wasn't just some primitive camping trip? What if the level of genius, desperation, and sheer stubbornness required to survive the ice was so immense that it completely rewired what it means to be human? And what if the price they paid for that survival is something we carry in our DNA to this very day? And this is the rabbit hole we are going down today. Buckle up, because it is about to get incredibly cold. Let's start at the very beginning. What does the cold actually do to you, and why was the Ice Age so much worse than a bad winter in Chicago? Let's get one thing straight right away. The Ice Age was not a winter wonderland. It wasn't a snowy forest with gentle snowflakes drifting down while you sit by a cozy campfire. If you were to step out of a time machine 20,000 years ago in, say, Central Europe or Northern Asia, you wouldn't see endless pine trees. You would see the mammoth steppe. It was the largest biome on Earth at the time. It was a massive, dry, endless grassland spanning from Spain all the way across Eurasia and into North America. It was incredibly dry because so much of the planet's water was locked up in massive continental glaciers. And it was cold. Mind-numbingly, bone-shatteringly cold. Average winter temperatures could easily plunge to -30 or -40 degrees. The wind howled across these plains with nothing to stop it. No mountains of trees to break the gales. Just relentless, freezing air, loaded with glacial dust. And right about now, you are probably thinking, well, why didn't they just pack up and walk south, go back to Africa, or at least the Mediterranean, and wait it out? Some did, but many didn't. Some populations were already pushed into these northern environments over tens of thousands of years following animal herds, and by the time the glacial maximum hit its peak, they were cut off. Geography, hostile neighboring tribes, or just the simple fact that the animals they hunted lived in the cold, all of this meant they had to stay and fight. And fighting the cold is a war against physics. When your skin registers a massive drop in temperature, your brain enters survival mode immediately. It triggers a process called vasoconstriction. The blood vessels in your arms, legs, fingers, and toes violently narrow. Your body is basically sacrificing your extremities to keep the warm blood circulating around your heart, your lungs, and your brain. If you stay out there, your muscles will start to spasm involuntarily. You start shivering. Shivering is just your body desperately burning calories to generate microscopic amounts of kinetic heat. If your core temperature drops just 2 degrees below normal, hypothermia begins. Confusion sets in. Your speech slurs. Drop a few more degrees and you stop shivering, which is the most terrifying sign of all because it means your body has simply run out of energy to fight. Drop further and your organs shut down. A naked human in a wind chill of -40 degrees will die in a matter of hours, maybe less. So, our ancestors needed a microclimate. They needed to carry a piece of the tropics with them into the snow. And you will say, well, they just killed an animal and threw a fur pelt over their shoulders. Simple. Okay, try throwing a loose blanket over your shoulders and walking into a blizzard. See how long you last. A loose animal skin draped over your body does not keep you warm in -40-degree wind. The wind simply cuts right underneath it, whipping the heat away from your skin faster than you can generate it. To survive the mammoth steppe, you couldn't just wear a dead animal, you had to become one. You needed clothes that trapped a layer of warm air completely flush against your skin. You needed tailored clothing, and to make tailored clothing, you need one of the most underappreciated technological marvels in human history. I am not exaggerating. This object is up there with the wheel, the control of fire, and the internet. The eyed needle. Let that land for a moment. A tiny sliver of bone with a microscopic hole drilled through one end. Back in 2016, archaeologists in the Denisova cave in Siberia found a bone needle that is roughly 50,000 years old. 50,000 years. It was carved from the bone of a large bird, meticulously scraped down and pierced. Think about the sheer mechanical genius required to do this. You have no metal tools. You have pieces of flint. You have to carefully carve a splinter of bone, polish it so it doesn't snag on the leather, and then drill a hole so small that a thread of animal sinew can pass through it. And you have to do this without snapping the bone in half. With this tiny tool, everything changed. Humans weren't just wrapping themselves in hides anymore. They were sewing tight-fitting, multi-layered garments. We know from studying modern indigenous Arctic peoples like the Inuit exactly how this works. You wear an inner layer of fur facing inward, right against your bare skin, to trap the heat. Then you wear an outer layer of fur facing outward to repel the wind and the moisture. You sew tight collars. You sew boots. You sew mittens. Without the needle, humanity stops at the ice sheets. The needle was our passport to the end of the world. But even if you have the warmest parka ever constructed by human hands, you still have a massive problem. You are a biological furnace, and furnaces need fuel. Let me throw you something even wilder. You are out on the frozen steppe. You have your tailored furs. You are warm, but you are starving. You look around, and there are no apple trees. There are no blackberry bushes. The ground is frozen solid beneath a layer of snow and dry grass for 8 months of the year. The entire concept of a balanced diet of fruits and vegetables is practically a myth here. So you hunt, you catch a rabbit, then you catch another rabbit. You eat them, but you are still starving. In fact, the more rabbits you eat, the sicker you get. This is a real physiological condition called protein poisoning, historically known as rabbit starvation. If you eat only very lean meat with almost no fat and no carbohydrates, your liver cannot process the proteins fast enough. Toxic levels of ammonia and urea build up in your blood. You can eat 10 pounds of lean rabbit meat a day and your stomach will be bulging, but you will literally starve to death while eating. The honest answer is, you cannot survive the Ice Age on small, lean game. You need fat. Massive, dripping, high-calorie amounts of animal fat. Fat is the only dense energy source available in the deep freeze that can keep your internal heater running. And where do you get massive amounts of fat on the Pleistocene steppe? You have to hunt the giants. We are talking about the megafauna, woolly rhinos, cave bears, steppe bison that weighed twice as much as a modern cow, and of course, the absolute king of the ice, the woolly mammoth. Now, imagine this scene. You are holding a stick with a sharpened piece of stone tied to the end of it. Maybe you have a spear thrower to give it a bit more velocity, and you are walking up to an animal that stands 10 to 12 feet tall at the shoulder, an animal that weighs between 4 and 6 metric tons, an animal with tusks the size of small trees and skin so thick it is basically biological armor. This is not a sport. This is not a fun weekend hunting trip. This is a terrifying, desperate, high-stakes game of survival. If you miss, you get crushed into red paste. If you don't kill it, your entire family starves. Exactly how they took down mammoths without modern weapons is something scientists still argue about. We don't have a video recording, but there is little direct data, mostly drawn from forensic analysis of the bones left behind and the injuries found on human skeletons. They didn't just charge at a mammoth screaming. That is a quick way to die. They had to use absolute tactical genius. They used the terrain. They drove these massive beasts into bogs, into deep snowdrifts, or toward the edges of ravines where the immense weight of the animal became its own worst enemy. Once a mammoth was stuck, unable to lift its massive legs from the freezing mud, the hunters would close in, aiming their spears at the softest points, the belly, the neck, blinding it, exhausting it. And when the beast finally fell, the real work began. They didn't just take the meat, they took the thick layers of fat, the blubber that insulated the mammoth. Isotopic analysis of the bones of ancient humans from this era shows chemical signatures that look almost exactly like the bones of wolves or cave lions. These people were apex predators. They were consuming staggering amounts of protein and animal fat. They were drinking bone marrow like soup. But a mammoth wasn't just lunch. When you live on a treeless plain and you need a shelter to escape the killing wind, what do you build it out of? There is no lumber. The ground is too frozen to dig deep caves everywhere. So, you build your house out of the monster you just ate. Yes, exactly that. I am not making this up. Back in 1965, a farmer in Ukraine was digging a cellar and struck a massive bone. Archaeologists were called in. What they uncovered at the site of Mezerich, which dates back some 15,000 years, genuinely breaks my brain every time I think about it. They found the ruins of intricately constructed, geometrically perfect houses made entirely out of mammoth bones. Picture this architecture. It is both macabre and incredibly beautiful. The foundation is made of massive mammoth skulls, interlocked with the jaws facing downward. A single mammoth skull can weigh around 100 kilograms. They moved these by hand. On top of the skulls, they stacked leg bones, shoulder blades, and pelvises to form the walls. And for the roof, they took the massive curving tusks and interlocked them over the top to create a domed frame. It is estimated that one of these houses required the bones of roughly 95 individual mammoths. That is an entire graveyard stacked into a living room. Once the bone frame was built, they would stretch heavy animal hides over the whole thing and pack it with earth and snow to seal out the wind. Inside, it was a tight, low-ceilinged space, and right in the center there was a hearth. But remember, there is no wood, so what were they burning? They burned the bones. Mammoth bone, especially the spongy interior filled with leftover fat and marrow, burns slow and hot. Imagine sitting inside one of these bone domes. Outside, a blizzard is tearing across the continent at 80 kilometers an hour. The temperature is so low it would freeze your eyes shut. But inside, it is dark, smoky, smelling strongly of burning animal fat, sweat, and dried blood. It is cramped. You are shoulder to shoulder with your family. The flickering orange light of the fire dances across the ivory tusks curving right above your head. You are safe. The ice cannot touch you here. You have conquered the unlivable world. And right here, you probably feel a sense of triumph. Look at us. Look at how smart, how resilient humanity is. We put on tailored coats, we took down mammoths, we built bone castles, and we won. But here is the part we don't like to talk about. And now I have to tell you the other side of this story. Because the truth is, this wasn't a glorious victory march across the ice. It wasn't a clean, heroic saga where everyone learned to sew, built a fire, and lived happily ever after. The Ice Age was a slaughter. We look at those surviving ancestors and we project our own success onto them. But for every band of humans that managed to build a mammoth bone house and keep the fire going, there were countless others who simply didn't. We weren't the only humans out there. We share this history with cousins who were, theoretically, much better equipped to handle the cold than we were. Think about the Neanderthals. They were literally built for the Ice Age. They had shorter, stockier bodies that conserved heat perfectly. They had massive nasal cavities to warm and humidify the freezing air before it hit their lungs. They were stronger, immensely tough, and they had been living in glacial Europe for hundreds of thousands of years before we even showed up. And yet, around 40,000 years ago, as the climate wildly oscillated and the deep cold began to set its final trap, the Neanderthals vanished. They didn't just magically turn into us, they died out. And it wasn't just them. The Denisovans in Asia, gone. And even within our own species, Homo sapiens, there are what geneticists call ghost populations. When we sequence the DNA of ancient remains found in certain caves, we sometimes find lineages of humans that have absolutely no living descendants today. Entire branches of our family tree that fought the cold, hunted the beasts, huddled around the fire, and lost. Sit with that for a second. Picture a small band of hunters, maybe 20 people in total. The winter has been too long, the herds have moved on, or the deep snow has buried everything. The hunters go out, burning thousands of precious calories, and they return with nothing. The fat reserves run out. The fire, which requires constant exhausting labor to feed, begins to burn a little lower, and a little lower, and a little lower. There is no rescue team. There is no neighboring tribe to ask for help, because the population density was so incredibly low that your nearest neighbors might be hundreds of miles away across an impassable glacier. You watch your breath form clouds in the dark. You listen to the wind rattling the animal skins. You look at the children, whose immune systems and tiny bodies just cannot hold the heat anymore. Infant mortality during these brutal periods was unimaginably high. You don't freeze instantly like in a movie. It is a slow, quiet, exhausting fade into sleep. The genetic evidence tells a terrifying story. Studies of human DNA show intense bottlenecks during the glacial periods. A bottleneck means that the population of humans crashed to staggeringly low numbers. By some estimates, there were periods where the entire global population of our species was reduced to just a few tens of thousands of breeding individuals. We were an endangered species. We were clinging to the edge of the abyss by our fingernails. Those bone houses? Those needles? They weren't just clever life hacks. They were the frantic, desperate inventions of a species that was watching its own kind die all around it. The ice was completely unforgiving. One mistake, one lost flint knife, one wet pair of boots, one fire that went out in the night, and an entire bloodline was erased from the earth forever. This feels both creeping and somehow immensely heavy to me, because when you strip away the romanticized caveman imagery, you are left with the sheer, raw trauma of survival. Our ancestors spent tens of thousands of years locked in a state of perpetual, existential dread. But you know, maybe that is exactly why we are the way we are. Don't let the darkness of that thought cancel out the miracle of what happened next. Because yes, the ice was a crucible. It killed the weak, it killed the unlucky, and it killed our cousins. But it also forged something entirely new. In order to survive that kind of relentless pressure, you cannot just be strong. A cave bear is strong, and the cave bears went extinct too. To survive the Ice Age, humans had to become radically, almost violently cooperative. You cannot hunt a mammoth alone. You cannot build a bone house alone. You cannot sit awake for 3 days feeding the fire alone. You have to trust the person next to you with your actual life. You have to share the fat. You have to take care of the sick and the elderly, because the elderly hold the memories of where the water is when the rivers freeze, and the sick might be the ones who know how to carve the best needle. And here is the most beautiful part of this entire story. The part that science can describe, but cannot fully crawl inside and explain. In those dark, smoky, cramped bone huts, while the wind screamed and the world outside was a frozen hell, they didn't just sit there staring blankly at the wall, waiting for the sun to come back. They made art. Deep in the caves of Europe, hiding from the glaciers, they took pigments and painted massive, breathing, spiritual murals of the very animals they hunted. They carved tiny, beautiful figurines out of mammoth ivory. And around 40,000 years ago, inside a cave in what is now Germany, someone took the wing bone of a vulture and carved holes into it. They made a flute. Think about that. You are starving. You are freezing. The world is trying to kill you. And your response is to sit by the fire and invent music. They dreamed, they told stories, they looked at the terrifying, deadly ice, and they decided that simply breathing wasn't enough. They had to create meaning. The cold forced us to bond together, and in that bonding, human culture as we know it ignited. The pressure of the ice squeezed out our capacity for language, for myth, for empathy, and for innovation. We don't know the names of the people who didn't wake up from the cold. We don't know the exact songs they played on those bone flutes, but the very fact that we sit here asking these questions, that we are alive to wonder about them, is the most astonishing thing in the known universe. We are the children of the survivors. We are the descendants of the absolute most stubborn, creative, desperate, and cooperative apes that ever walked the earth. So let's bring it all back to today. It is a Tuesday in January. Your alarm is going off. You look at the radiator. You pull that soft, manufactured blanket right up to your chin, dreading the moment you have to step onto the cold floor. It is the same human body, the same absolute, biological hatred of the cold. But now you know what that feeling actually is. It is not just you being lazy. It is an echo. It is a biological memory from 50,000 years ago, screaming at you to stay close to the fire, to stay under the furs, because the outside world is not meant for you. The warmth you take for granted today, the heater, the walls, the hot coffee, the heavy coat, is not just convenience. It is the final victory in a war that lasted thousands of generations. A war fought with bone needles, flint spears, and sheer, unreasonable hope. You survived the ice. Never let anyone tell you that you are just an ordinary creature. If you've got a heavy blanket near you right now, pull it a little closer. And tell me in the comments down below, if you were dropped back into the mammoth steppe with a bone needle and a flint rock, do you think you could have lasted even a week? I read these and I'm genuinely curious who among us thinks they still have that ancestral grit. If this journey made you look at your morning routine differently, hit the subscribe button. We are building a community here of people who love peeling back the layers of the ordinary world to see the absolute wildness hiding underneath. Stay warm out there.